Hi, I'm Dave Pierdomenico, and welcome to half of the Philly Film Brothers podcast. And while we're at it, a Happy New Year. To close out 2019, I thought it would be fun to do a best, worst, and biggest surprises of the year. So let's get started. The best of 2019. Number 5, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I think it was Tarantino definitely misled us. I think a lot of us went into this expecting it to be like a retelling of the Manson murders. And I'm really glad that it wasn't. It was very much his own thing. Like with Inglourious Bastards, he told his version of history, and he did it all while writing his own love letter to Hollywood. To any movie fan, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is just it's a glorification of just old school Hollywood and movies and the industry. And what I love about DiCaprio's Rick Dalton is, he could be a stand-in for any famous actor at that time, and what they were going through with the changing in the culture, the changing in the times, and in film as well. So to me, it captured what it loves to be a movie lover. And I felt that from Tarantino, along with some genuinely really tense scenes, particularly the one with Brad Pitt on Spahn Ranch was just. I was waiting for something terrible to happen, and then when it didn't, I was more tense. Number 4, Joker. As divisive as this movie was, no, it did not inspire me to be crazy, because let's face it, I was already crazy. So if anything, it had a sane effect on me. But in all seriousness, 10 years ago, this movie never could have happened. You wouldn't even think to make it. But what it did was it took a character that we all know and love, and it gave us a unique window into him. I think that I love genre bending. I loved it when Marvel did it with Logan, by making that a Western. I loved it when Spider-Man did it, where it's basically a John Hughes comedy, or even when Captain America did it with Winter Soldier, where it's like a 70s spy thriller. And I think that's the next step to take comic book movies, because no, they can't all be too superhero-like or world-ending, but there's a lot we can do with that, and Joker just shows one of those examples. Before I saw it, I was hoping it would be more of a standalone, but now that I have seen it, I really want to see this Joker take on Batman. I want to see Joaquin Phoenix fight Robert Pattinson, assuming that that's still who they're going with. But I really enjoyed it. I still love Heath Ledger. He will always be the best Joker to me, but to me, this movie was less about the Joker and more about Arthur Fleck. So I'll say Joaquin Phoenix is the best Arthur Fleck. Heath Ledger is the best Joker, but time will tell if that changes and if we get more with him. Number 3, Knives Out. To all you crying Star Wars fans, and you know who you are, to all you fans who whined and complained that Rian Johnson ruined Last Jedi, well, Rian Johnson showed us he doesn't need Star Wars. I think that when he does his own thing, it certainly received a lot better, and I think maybe that was the mistake with Last Jedi, was he was doing his own thing but in a beloved franchise. But with something like Knives Out, he was free to give us whatever he wanted, and what he gave us was a modern take on a classic murder mystery, and it was brilliant. I saw it, I actually saw it at an early screening, packed theater, and just feeling the energy of the room really helped with the experience. I loved seeing Chris Evans tell people to eat shit. That was just so the antithesis of Captain America, and the perfect role for him to do, coming off of Endgame and a decade of Marvel. And as I look through it, even the minor characters in this, there's not a single weak link. Everyone knows their character. Everyone knows what to bring, and it's to me it was perfect in that it knew what it wanted to do and it pulled it off perfectly. It was hilarious. It kept me guessing. I thought I had it figured out halfway through, and then I didn't. And that, that bit at the end, where she's holding the mug that says "My House" was just the perfect finishing touch. Number two, The Lighthouse. Now, I'm known to be a horror fan, and, well, if it were up to me, this whole list would have been horror movies, but I don't want to alienate anybody, so I included this one because this was the horror movie that, to me, it was the closest thing we've come to The Shining since The Shining, even more so than Doctor Sleep, because Robert Eggers has already proved he's a brilliant director. Robert Eggers has already proved he's a brilliant director. 2015's The Witch is still one of my favorite horror movies, not just of that year, but of the decade. And what I loved about The Lighthouse was the whole time that Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe are in that lighthouse, slowly descending into madness, you feel it too. You feel the tension. You feel, something terrible is going to happen, and you don't want to see it, but you can't look away at the same time. And I've always felt like there's this huge disparity among horror fans and the horror community, that there's commercial popcorn horror and then there's art house intellectual horror. And I don't think that the art house brand gets nearly enough attention. I think that sadly a lot of horror fans ignore it, and The Lighthouse is just one that should have gotten more attention, should have gotten nominated for Oscars. I'm looking at you, Academy. You ripped it off the same way you ripped off Hereditary last year. If you want a movie that'll make you feel like you're slowly going insane too, The Lighthouse is for you. And finally, number one. Technically not fully horror. You could consider more of a comedy. Ready or Not. I actually got this as a Christmas present a week ago, and it was my favorite present because I love this movie. Ready or Not, similar to Knives Out, it has that old school, old money feel to it in that, they're in a giant mansion, but it's modern, and it has, modern, meta, self-aware humor. I loved that it has that dark sense of humor. I loved that it felt like The Purge, but funnier. It just, and again, like with Knives Out, there's not a single weak link in that cast. Everyone gives it their all. Everyone is completely unique and different enough, and what made it most compelling to me was, so the whole time, the family who's hunting down the bride and trying to kill her, they're not doing it because they're crazy. They're doing it because they honestly believe if they don't, they will be killed by the curse if they don't fulfill this sacrifice. So it added, not that it justified their actions, but it helped us understand what motivated them, that they didn't necessarily want to be doing this, but to them it was about survival, and it was pitting these two sides against each other, both of which were willing to do anything to defeat the other, for fear of dying. Now for the top 5 worst, I'm too much of a movie lover to be too critical of anything, so we're actually going to have our correspondent from London give us that list.
Thank you. My name is Tobias from London. Now, I know what you're bloody thinking. You're thinking, isn't it a little desperate for this channel to bring back an old character from so long ago? Well, if Star Wars can do it, so can Dork Daily. So what? Wait, why am I bloody here again? Oh, right. The top 5 worst movies of 2019. Number 5, Pet Sematary. I'm looking at you, Stephen King. But not really you, I'm actually looking at Paramount. What was wrong with the first Pet Sematary? It's a classic, it was written by King, he's bloody in it, it has Fred Gwynne, Herman Munster, what more could you ask for? But they're like, no, we need to do a remake, and we need to switch it with the daughter and the son, which admittedly is not the worst idea in the world if you do it right. The problem is, the new Pet Sematary decides that it doesn't want to be a movie by itself. It wants to gloss over things like Lewis and Judd's friendship. It wants to just take giant leaps and bounds and forget about important emotional character scenes, you've already seen the original. You can fill in the gaps. It's okay enough if you watch it right after the original, but on its own, it's horrible. And for the record, Mr. John Lithgow, I'll respect you. You're my man, Trinity Killer, love you. But the line is not sometimes dead is better. The line is sometimes dead is better. And that is how you say it. The movie is about bringing people back from the dead. Could you not bring back Fred Gwynn? Don't even get me started on that. Or the whole fake out with Gage and Ellie, and you think he's going to get hit by the truck. I want to see a version of Pet Sematary from the point of view of the truck. You know, Stephen King, fun fact, Stephen King was actually really high on cocaine in all of the 80s. But what he wrote back then is still better than Pet Sematary. At least Maximum Overdrive was so terrible it was fun. This was just terrible. Number 4. Glass. Now, I will be the first to admit that when I saw Split at the very end and Bruce Willis shows up, I was very excited to see where they were going to go with that. I thought, oh, are we going to see David Dunn take on the Beast in an epic battle? No, we're going to see them get into a shoving fight with some cars, and then the cops show up. Instead of an epic showdown with them and Mr. Glass himself, we're going to see them just hang out in a mental place for like an hour and a half. Oh, instead of seeing David Dunn be the ultimate hero he's always meant to be, he's going to die in a puddle. Oh, instead of seeing Mr. Glass be this awesome mastermind criminal, he's going to be catatonic for the first hour. First of all, Glass should be called Ass, because it was a boring ass movie. Oh, I'm M. Night Shyamalan. I made a massive comeback with The Visit and Split. Now I'm going to throw it all away with Glass and watch it shatter all over the heads of every moviegoer that decides to see it. I've written this really interesting character named Mr. Glass, the best intellectual villain since Magneto or the Joker. I'm going to keep him catatonic for the first hour of the movie. Oh, I'm M. Night Shyamalan. I'm going to tease this big epic finale where they go to the tallest building in the world and try to what were they bloody doing? No one cares. But they were going to do something. Oh no, let's have a fight in the bloody parking lot instead. Like we're in freaking school. It almost feels like that M. Night planned that movie and planned that ending long before the whole superhero craze from Marvel and all that. And I'll think that in 2002, that would have been a good movie because let's face it, the bar for superhero movies was set very low back then. We all remember that original X-Men. It's good, but rewatch it again. You'll see. It could have been amazing. It was the most anticipated crossover since Infinity War and Endgame. And M. Night, you're best when you're doing a twist, but when you're doing action, we need more than just shoving into cars. Though, admittedly, James McAvoy still deserves his Oscar for Split. I am waiting. Number 3, Captive State. Now, this one is not... It's not the worst movie in the world. It's only the third worst, according to my scale. But it does some things right. It wasn't a terrible idea to do an alien invasion, but to do it kind of realistic and gritty. But the whole time, it's never sure, does it want to be this gritty urban crime thriller, or does it want to be a sci-fi alien action movie? And it never really commits to either, and it just sort of gives up on both. And then the whole point of the movie is its cliffhanger ending where John Goodman goes down to meet the legislators as the, first of all, dumb name for aliens. Oh, we're invading aliens. We're here to take over the world. What should we call you? The Kree? The Necromonger? Even E.T.? No, call us the legislators. What sort of pompous Frasier-like aliens are these? And second of all, when your whole movie is based on having a cliffhanger ending lead to the next one, what happens when your movie doesn't do well enough to warrant a sequel? Guess what, Captive State? You found out, didn't you? Like I said, interesting premise, but we don't really need to see Boys in the Hood meets Independence Day. Oh, don't even get me started on... Oh, we've built up this whole movie that we're going to show you the aliens, and then all we get is bloody John Goodman going down an elevator. How exciting. How many people would have bought tickets to see that movie if on the poster it said, at the end of the movie, John Goodman goes down an elevator? How's that for an epic climax? Number 2, Countdown. No, not the countdown I'm doing. Countdown, the horror movie with the app on your phone that kills you. First of all, there's already an app on your phone that kills you. It's called whatever app you're using while you're brazenly walking into oncoming traffic. And second of all, you bloody wasted the best premise since Final Destination. Oh, an app on your phone that tells you when you're gonna die. Will that mess with our characters' heads? What sort of consequences will that have? Let's not make that movie. Let's make a movie with really hammy acting, really bad writing, and a bloody priest who forgot that he was still in character from his Wolf of Wall Street character. I'm all for slapstick. I'm all for humor. But there's a limit. It's almost like the priest thought he was in a slapstick comedy and everyone else thought they were in a horror movie, but they weren't very good at it. I mean, it's frustrating because it's actually a pretty decent premise, if you think about it. But it's wasted. It's wasted on typical PG-13 jump scare horror that doesn't amount to anything. First of all, don't get me started on jump. If your movie needs to rely on jump scares, that's like a comedian trying to tickle you to get a laugh. And finally, I have to prepare for this. The number 1 worst movie of 2019 is Serenity. No, not this Serenity. You see, this Serenity was actually a really good movie that gave us an ending to a series that Fox screwed up. But the Serenity that I'm talking about is the bloody one that reunites Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway since Interstellar. And I get the feeling that the director said, hey, Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway, do you want to go from making this brilliant sci-fi epic that will last generations to making the worst video game movie since the Super Mario Brothers? Oh, what's that you say? You didn't realize Serenity was a video game movie? Guess what? Neither did anyone else to the third act. The thing is, it's forgettable in the beginning. It's bland. It's McConaughey doing his thing. He's good at it, give him credit. But it suddenly turns from this drama thriller about a man trying to reconnect with his ex-wife and his son, and then randomly, it was a video game all along. Serenity? That's a video game movie? Yeah, the screenwriter decided to make it up 2/3 through. Oh, let's see how that works with other movies. You watching Gone with the Wind? Guess what? You're playing the Oregon Trail. You like Ford versus Ferrari? Guess what? You were playing Cruis'n USA the whole time. You watching Pokemon the movie? That's actually, no, that actually is a video game. Never mind. Forget that example. But you see my point. It would be like watching bloody Citizen Kane, but at the end, Mr. Kane was just playing Pong the entire time. Because that's what people wanted to see. It's as bad as, at least in The Village, when they did their twist ending and it was actually modern day, it made sense because, get this, our modern day follows the 1800s. But where in the hell do you go from Matthew McConaughey on an island to a video game? And second of all, that's the worst video game anyone's ever made. Hey, do you want to play Pac-Man? Do you want to play Sonic? Do you want to play Super Mario? No, I want to play a game where Matthew McConaughey tries to get his ex-wife back. That's exciting. I can't even. You know what? I need to stop talking about this movie. It infuriates me so much. I'm just going to go watch Dr. Sleep again and just be done with this. I'm done. Don't ask me to do any more of these. Okay, I came out of retirement once. I won't do it again. Happy New Year or something. I don't care. However, before I go, I need to give a shout out to my most loyal fan, Tom. Thank you for always supporting Tobias. You are one of the only people in this world I do not despise. And you are a true loyalist.
Thanks, Tobias. That was enough of you for another decade. Now for the top 5 biggest surprises of 2019. Now, this category, I do it every year and I define it very loosely. Surprise can mean I expected it to be terrible, but it was great. Surprise can mean I expected it to be great, but it was terrible. Or even just the way it was received surprised me. So take these with a bit of a grain of salt. It's a bit broadly defined, and perhaps a better name for this category is the top 5 most interesting ones, or at least the ones that were received the most interestingly. Number 5, Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Do you really think we'd get away with not talking about it on this list? I'll say this. I mean, you can watch the other video for my full thoughts. Chris and I did not agree at all about it. What I will say is it surprised me in the sense that when I first heard that Palpatine was returning, I was furious. And if you recall, I went into that one jokingly saying, well, if he's really back, I'm going to get up out of my seat and leave. I didn't do that because only losers do that. But I wasn't very happy about that. I wasn't happy that they did that. I felt that it was desperate. That being said, I wasn't expecting to like so much that I did. J.J. Abrams, to his credit, really, he did just enough fan service in just the right way. Little things between seeing Lando and Chewie and the Falcon again, finally giving Chewie his friggin' medal. Little things like that. C-3PO's sense of humor and the banter between the characters that we didn't really get much of in the previous 2 installments. So the reason why it surprised me was I was expecting to hate all of it. I still hated the things I knew I was going to, but I was surprised that I liked so many other things about it. Number 4, Godzilla King of the Monsters. Where to begin? First of all, we Americans, this is why we can't have nice things. This is why we don't deserve a good Godzilla movie, because when they make a good Godzilla movie, we don't see it. I really liked the 2014 one. I agree we didn't see very much of Godzilla, but I liked where they went with it. I liked the whole mythology of it. I loved Ken Watanabe's character. And in this one, I'll be the first to admit that the human ones were okay, and I wasn't a big fan of the whole eco-terrorist subplot thing that kind of came out of nowhere and didn't really go anywhere, but much to my pleasant surprise, we got to see Godzilla face off against some of the giants, quite literally, from that mythos. We saw him with Mothra and King Ghidorah, which was... Why did more people not see it for that reason? I mean, people complained in the first one, give us more monster fights. This gave us like a dozen really cool monsters, and nobody saw it. So it's on this list because it surprised me that they did such a good job with the monster fights. And it also surprised me that when they gave us the very thing we cried for, nobody saw it. That's on you, moviegoers. And again, that's why I know we're still getting Godzilla versus Kong, but that might be it. That might be it. So we'll see. Number 3, Detective Pikachu. This one, I had no idea what to go in expecting. When I first... Wait a minute. Ryan Reynolds is Pikachu? What are you smoking? And can I have some? But to my surprise, it somehow worked perfectly in that it wasn't really Pikachu. It was his father, going into Pikachu in his mind and just everything. I loved that they created this believable world with live action people and Pokemon just sort of coexisting side by side. And I think that I want to see more movies, not just about Detective Pikachu. I want to see other genre movies set in that same world. I don't think even Warner Brothers realizes the amazing potential they have with that. They're probably just going to make more Detective Pikachu movies when I want to see the mafia thriller set in that world. I want to see an office comedy set in that world. There's so much you can do with it that I hope they do, but they wouldn't have been able to do it without creating this world. And somehow, among all of it, with Mewtwo, they still connected it back to Pokemon the first movie. That's still canon. So that means, is Ash Ketchum somewhere in this world? Could we explore that later? Is he upset that it took him over 20 years to become a Pokemon master? You know, I'd love to see that movie with middle-aged, depressed Ash Ketchum wondering why it took him so long. You know, it can be kind of like a cross between Office Space and Failure to Launch or something. But it was much better than I was expecting it to be. Number 2, Happy Death Day to You. Now, the first one, really cool premise. The whole idea of Groundhog Day, but a slasher movie. Now, I know the whole Groundhog Day gimmick had been done before. Not just in Groundhog, but in other movies since then. Before I Fall comes to mind. There might be one or two others I'm forgetting. But I thought it was done well. I thought it was a cool gimmick. It worked for the movie. The lead actress, Jessica Roth, I think I'm saying that right. She's what made that first movie, was her performance and her range and her development, which was more than I can say for any other final girl of most slasher movies. So when they said they were going to do a sequel where it's the next day, I thought, why? And somehow they and again, that's why it's on this list, they went from a slasher film, Groundhog Day, to sci-fi, Back to the Future, alternate universes. And somehow it worked, and it explained the first one. I think none of us really cared why Tree was stuck in the same day over and over again. But finding out that it was because the physics students did some weird experiment with alternate universes, somehow that enriches it, and I love the concept that there's more to it. It went more slapstick with the comedy, which normally I hate, but it worked here because, let's face it, the first one never really took itself that seriously. So I feel like because of they could get away with it. So I went into this expecting another just straight up slasher horror sequel ripoff, and I got this weird 80s sci-fi comedy that no one asked for, but I didn't hate. I really liked it. And finally, number 1, the most surprising movie of 2019, The Kid Who Would Be King. I want you to picture this movie. I'm just going to give you hints. It's a movie about a British kid who discovers a secret magical power, and there's this whole world based on mythology that he's part of that he didn't know about. And there's magic, and he has to take on this evil sorcerer villain at the end. What movie am I talking about? Am I talking about Harry Potter? Am I talking about Aragon? Am I talking about The Sorcerer's Apprentice? I know he was American, but whatever. Am I talking about any number of these lazy fantasy movies with kids that just, it's the same thing over and over again? So I went into this one very much begrudgingly. I'll be honest, I only went to it because I had 2 hours to kill. Because, long story, I had 2 hours to kill, and it was either sit in the car and do nothing or go see this movie. And that's why I'm literally telling you this, because that's how much I didn't care to see this. But when I did, it was actually really good. It took a lot of those cliches, it spun them on their heads. It gave us a really good young Merlin with also an old Merlin with Patrick Stewart. It took everything that these fantasy movies do wrong, and it did them right. It was actually an interesting story. It was legitimately dark and creepy when they start raising these, demons from the underworld, and the kid has to fight them. And the whole point about him being like Arthur and making, allies out of enemies, the movie took that theme very seriously and it took it to heart. I think we all knew that he was going to team up with the bullies, to fight them. But the way he did it, the way that it did everything was just. I went in expecting a bore fest, and what I got was a movie that almost feels like it didn't realize it was a kid's movie, so it was really good. It didn't fall into that trap so many kids and movies fall into where they say, well, it's just aimed at kids, so we don't have to try. It actually tried, and it's actually pretty brilliant. And those are our lists. Happy New Year. Chris and I will be back for more podcast reviews in 2020. There's plenty coming out and plenty to talk about. You can look for us at youtube.com/dorkdaily or just dorkdaily.com. Have a happy new year, and we'll see you in 2020. Were you really doing that the entire time? Have you no shame? No? You're a cat? Okay. He's a cat with no shame.